By sunrise, the streets of Pompeii had disappeared. Doorways were buried. Roofs had collapsed. The air had become almost impossible to breathe. But this was not a city destroyed without warning. For hour after hour, the people of Pompeii watched the sky turn black. Some fled immediately. Others returned for their possessions. Many remained inside their homes, convinced that stone walls could protect them. They were wrong. The final disaster did not fall from the sky. It came racing across the ground.
Hello, everyone. Today on Jawad Docs, we are traveling back nearly 2,000 years to reconstruct the final hours of one of history's most famous cities. We will discover what the people of Pompeii saw, which choices they faced, and why so many remained when escape may still have been possible. Subscribe to Jawad Docs for more documentaries, stories, and discoveries. And if you enjoy this journey, leave a like to help us bring these forgotten worlds back to life. Before it became a symbol of death, Pompeii was a city of noise. Wheels struck the raised stones of its streets. Vendors called from open shops. Bakers prepared bread in large stone ovens. Political messages covered the walls. Families collected water, visited public baths, and moved through the forum at the center of civic life. The city belonged to Rome, but its character came from centuries of Greek, Samnite, and Roman influence. Behind the doors of its wealthiest houses were painted gardens, fountains, and dining rooms decorated with scenes from mythology. Elsewhere, workers, enslaved people, merchants, and freed citizens lived in smaller, more crowded spaces. Pompeii was not a museum. It was an unequal, ambitious, and intensely human city. And in the year 79, much of it was still under repair. 17 years earlier, a powerful earthquake had damaged temples, houses, and public buildings. Construction materials remained visible across the city. Some walls had been repaired, others were still waiting. Earthquakes were therefore familiar. When the ground shook again, it did not automatically mean that the end was coming. To the north stood a mountain covered with farms and vineyards. It did not look exactly like the Vesuvius we recognize today. Its ancient shape had been transformed by earlier eruptions, and its slopes supported fertile land. The Romans knew that fire existed beneath parts of the Italian landscape, but the people of Pompeii had no modern science of volcanic monitoring, no seismographs, no evacuation maps, and no emergency alerts. They could observe strange events, but they could not connect them into a reliable warning. Small earthquakes had become more frequent. Ancient accounts also describe wells or water sources behaving unusually. But every warning has meaning only when people understand what it predicts. For the inhabitants of Pompeii, the mountain was part of the landscape. It was not yet a countdown. Then, around midday, the mountain exploded. Across the Bay of Naples, a 17-year-old named Pliny watched an extraordinary cloud rise into the sky. He later wrote that it resembled a Mediterranean pine tree, a narrow trunk climbing upward before spreading into branches high above the mountain. Today, eruptions of this type are called Plinian eruptions because of his description. The column carried ash, gas,
and volcanic fragments kilometers into the atmosphere. At first, the spectacle may have inspired curiosity as much as fear. There was no television image of another eruption to compare it with. No public authority could explain what would happen next. Then the material began to fall. Light pieces of white pumice struck roofs, courtyards, and streets. The stones were full of air, but there were countless millions of them. The daylight weakened, and the first great decision began. Stay inside or leave.
From our perspective, the correct choice seems obvious: run. But the people inside Pompeii did not know the scale, duration, or direction of the disaster. Leaving meant entering streets filled with falling rock. It meant abandoning food, money, animals, documents, household gods, and almost everything a family possessed. It also meant choosing a direction without knowing which roads remained safe. Some residents probably believed the eruption would end quickly. Others may have decided to wait until the stonefall weakened. The elderly, the injured, enslaved workers, and people responsible for children or animals could not all move at the same speed. And some households may have followed the instinct humans still follow during disasters. They sheltered inside the strongest place they knew. At first, that decision was not irrational. The earliest stones were frightening, but many buildings remained standing. The danger appeared to be outside. What the residents could not see was the weight accumulating above them.
Hour after hour, pumice continued to fall. The streets became deep fields of loose stone. Every step required more effort. Sandals slipped. Carts became useless. Familiar routes disappeared beneath the debris. Inside the houses, roofs carried a growing burden. Then they began to fail. Tiles shattered into rooms. Beams broke. Walls weakened by the earlier earthquake collapsed under the new pressure. For some residents, the shelter they had trusted became the first cause of death. Outside, the darkness deepened. Ash entered eyes and mouths. People covered their faces with cloth. Lamps provided small circles of light, but the streets no longer looked like the city they knew. Those who fled now had to climb across a rising layer of pumice that would eventually reach several meters in some areas. Yet many people did escape. The ruins preserve the bodies of those who died, not the empty spaces left by everyone who successfully reached safety. Pompeii's story is therefore not only a story of victims, it is also a story of thousands of decisions whose successful outcomes left no dramatic cast behind.
Across the bay, the eruption was also being watched by Pliny's uncle, Pliny the Elder. He was a scholar, an author, and commander of the Roman fleet at Misenum. At first, he prepared to investigate the strange cloud. Then a message arrived asking for help. His mission changed from observation to rescue. Ships were ordered toward the danger. The sea and wind made the operation difficult. Falling ash and hot stones struck the vessels as they approached the affected coast. Pliny eventually reached Stabiae, south of Pompeii, where frightened residents were waiting. He tried to project calm, but during the night, the eruption entered a more dangerous phase. The great column above Vesuvius could no longer support its own weight. It began to collapse.
The first catastrophic currents moved down the volcano. These were not rivers of lava.
They were pyroclastic density currents, turbulent mixtures of hot gas, ash, and volcanic material moving close to the ground at extraordinary speed. Herculaneum stood closer to the volcano than Pompeii. There, the currents arrived with such heat and force that survival in the exposed areas was effectively impossible. Buildings were buried, wood was charred, people sheltering near the ancient shoreline were overwhelmed. But Pompeii was farther away. During parts of the night, smaller currents failed to destroy the city. For anyone still alive inside its walls, that may have created a fatal impression. The mountain had roared for hours, roofs had fallen, yet they had survived the night. Perhaps the worst was over.
Near dawn, conditions changed. The heavy fall briefly weakened. Some survivors may have emerged from hiding. Others may have tried to escape only now, after waiting for the streets to become safer. Imagine what they could see. A city transformed into a gray landscape. Upper floors protruding above stone. Streets level with doorways. Fires burning beneath a sky without color. The mountain itself was hidden. This was the final window in which human decisions still mattered. Some people walked toward the gates, carrying jewelry, coins, tools, or household objects. These possessions are sometimes described as evidence of greed. That judgment is too easy. For a Roman family, portable wealth could determine whether they found shelter, food, or a new life after losing their home. They were not simply carrying treasure. They were carrying whatever future they could hold in their hands. Then, the eruption column failed again. This time, the current continued toward Pompeii.
The cloud moved along the ground, spreading across the countryside and entering the city through streets, doors, windows, and collapsed roofs. For decades, popular images suggested that every victim in Pompeii was instantly burned by extreme heat. The reality may have been more complex. A modern scientific model estimated that the diluted current at Pompeii may have had an average temperature near 115 degrees Celsius, still deadly but lower than the currents closer to the volcano. Its destructive power was not based only on heat. It lasted. According to the model, ash-laden conditions continued for approximately 17 minutes. Fine particles filled every breath. A few seconds became a minute. 1 minute became 5. There was no clean air beneath a table, no safe room behind a closed door. Cloth over the mouth could not create oxygen. The same current that left many walls standing made human survival impossible because exposure continued for too long. Pompeii did not die in one cinematic flash. It suffocated. When the eruption finally ended, Pompeii was gone beneath layers of volcanic material. The city's dead remained hidden for centuries. Their famous forms are not bodies turned directly into stone. After burial, the organic remains decomposed and left empty spaces inside the hardened ash.
During 19th century excavations, archaeologist Giuseppe Fiorelli developed a method of pouring plaster into these cavities. The resulting casts preserved extraordinary details. The folds of clothing, the shape of sandals, the position of a hand, the final movement of a person trying to shield a face. More than 1,000 victims have been discovered in Pompeii, though only a smaller number were preserved as casts. They should not be treated as props from an ancient disaster. They were children, workers, families, visitors and residents whose individual stories are mostly lost. Their positions show us fear, but the objects around them also show planning, responsibility, and hope. Many were still trying to leave.
So why did so many people remain? There was no single reason. Some underestimated a danger no living person around them had experienced. Some trusted their houses. Some could not travel easily. Some waited for relatives. Some delayed until the falling stones became too heavy. Others may have fled, returned for possessions, and become trapped by changing conditions. And many escaped. The tragedy of Pompeii was not that its inhabitants ignored an obvious warning. It was that each stage of the eruption looked survivable until it was followed by something worse. An earthquake could be endured. Falling pumice could be avoided indoors. A damaged roof could be abandoned. A temporary calm could appear to offer another chance. But the people of Pompeii were solving one danger at a time. They could not see the complete sequence that scientists reconstructed centuries later. That is what makes their final hours so disturbing. Their choices were human. The disaster was beyond their imagination.
Pompeii is often described as a city frozen in time. But it was not frozen. It was interrupted. Its unfinished repairs, election messages, meals, tools, and footprints preserve a society still moving forward when the mountain changed everything. And perhaps that is why Pompeii continues to affect us. We do not see a distant civilization preparing for history. We see ordinary people expecting tomorrow. What would you have done during those final hours? Would you have left at the first explosion, or waited inside for the falling stones to stop? Share your answer in the comments and tell us which lost city or historical event Jawad Docs should explore next. Subscribe, leave a like, and join us again for another documentary, another story, and another discovery. Until next time.